Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Charade is over, and you fell for it like an egg from a tall chicken.
Do we know each other?
Why do you think we're going to?
I don't know. How would I know?
Because I already know an awful lot of people, and until one of them dies, I couldn't possibly meet anyone else.
Well, if anyone goes on the critical list, let me know.
As you can see, she was in serious trouble. But she still found time to enjoy herself.
Mrs. Lambert, any morning now you could wake up dead.
Of course, she never had as much fun as her husband. Now, he knew how to relax. You see, it all began when he got off the train.
All right, Andy, do you still contend that Charade is your favorite of the movies that we've done here?
I do.
After watching this trash next to North by Northwest?
It's great watching two Cary Grant favorites back to back.
It really is. This was. I have to tell you, I think I'm the one who turned. It's been a long time since I've seen this movie, and I like it the best too.
Hey, there you go.
And that Audrey Hepburn, she's
Isn't she a delight?
amazing.
He's just a delight.
So there's a lot of buffoonery in this movie, and it's very, very twisty. Where does this put us with our Cary Grant, our current obsession with Cary Grant? Obsession, by obsession, I mean series.
Yeah, we're in 1963. This is really toward the tail end of Grant's career. After this, he's only going to make 2 more films before he retires. He was 59 at the time he made this. And, he really had already kind of retired from playing the romantic lead. And it was kind of a push to get him into this film to play this romantic lead with Audrey Hepburn, especially because of the huge age difference. There's a 25-year age difference between the 2 actors. And he really was felt uncomfortable about it. And so that's why Stanley Donen had Peter Stone really kind of work with the screenplay and add a lot of little elements to throw in references to the age difference between the characters, and also to really make Reggie, Audrey Hepburn's character, be the one who is the pursuer. He is, and you can really tell when you watch this movie that his interest seems pretty light, and really is, he's the more passive of the 2, and she's really the one who's interested in him. And, I think that it ends up playing out okay, the way that it works. And I think as far as Grant is concerned, I feel like it just made for a great film toward the end of his acting career that just allowed him to still have kind of the humor, the suave, debonair charm, and still get into something that felt a little Hitchcockian and just have fun with it. So I'm thrilled that this was one of the films that he got to do late in his career, because for me, it really is just as career defining as North by Northwest.
So let's talk about the Hitchcock thing, because that's something that is often discussed with this movie. It has been referred to as the best Hitchcock film that Hitchcock never made. And it starts with a very Hitchcockian opening. Right. Here we are. There's a train. Oh, my goodness. Andy, a train and a body in pajamas thrown from the train. If that's not a Hitchcock opening, I don't know what is.
There's, it's funny when you look at the elements that make up kind of what is Hitchcockian and kind of try to decide, is this a Hitchcockian film? Is there something about it that Stanley Donen created that feels very much Hitchcockian? Because there are a lot of elements that Hitchcock uses that aren't in here. Like, we don't have, like, Audrey Hepburn definitely isn't the blonde that we have so often in Hitchcock's films. But we do have kind of innocent people thrust into kind of a strange and dangerous situation. That's definitely a very Hitchcockian element. And so I feel like, and to a certain extent, you could almost say Hitchcock really liked using famous landmarks. And you could say to a certain extent, there are some pretty recognizable spots in Paris that are brought up as different places.
Right.
And so I think that, and even Stanley Donen said he really, like, North by Northwest was one of his favorite films, and he really wanted to make something that kind of had that same feel. He wanted to make something that was very much in that style. And so when he found this script, he just like, oh, that's it. And so I feel like, I think it's kind of an apt thing to say that the best Hitchcock movie that Hitchcock never made, which is an often repeated phrase about this film. It feels that way. And I mean, to a certain extent, do you call the stamps a MacGuffin? Yeah, maybe. I don't know if it's completely a MacGuffin, but I feel like there are elements there that makes it feel that way.
Well, I think so too. The thing about the stamps is they didn't end up being irrelevant, right?
Sure.
Like, without the stamps, there's less of a movie. There's no chase.
Yeah, right. So that's why it's not quite the MacGuffin,
right?
Even though it's the thing they're all chasing. But you're right; it is very much an actual
it's
element
a
of the plot.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
I think it's interesting this film. I was thinking about it as Stanley Donen's sort of love letter to Hitchcock. Right. It's an homage. It's an aspiration. It is a paying of respect to these other movies that he loves so much, and you can kind of feel it, but it does not, to me, feel like a copy. There's so much personality in this movie, so much, you could say, more personality. It is like the strongly extroverted answer to the introverts North by Northwest, right? That everybody is sort of exuberantly participating in the chase. Even Audrey Hepburn's character, who is the fish out of water, unwittingly wrapped up in this caper, and so everybody is actively involved. No one's running from it. No one's turning their back on it. And in the process, it allows so many just sort of flamboyant twists of fate and character turns. And, Cary Grant has 5 different identities that he moves through in this movie and is forgiven for all of them, which I think is hysterical. Did you find at any point in this movie, and I know the answer already, I'm asking, almost a rhetorical question, did you ever find that this was awash with so many twists that it distracted from the thriller? I read a criticism of the film that said it was too much, that it was too many twists and it didn't know what it wanted to be.
I struggle with that because I feel like from the get-go, we're set up with kind of the thrill and the kind of that spy thriller, body thrown off the train. But then, and then we go into kind of playing with that genre right away, where it turns into the kind of the comedy, which again is something Hitchcock really did well, blending kind of the comedy and the thriller. When we have Reggie at this fantastic ski resort in the Alps somewhere, and she, you see a gun come out from behind an umbrella, and suddenly it squirts water at her. It's a squirt gun. And so right away, we're getting that kind of that tone. This is going to be a thriller, but it's also going to be kind of, we're having fun with it. We're kind of doing the kind of a comedy version of this. And when you're having kind of a thriller like this, that's kind of a spy thriller, having twists is part of the nature of it. It's like saying that Jean Le Carré has too many twists in his stories. I mean, that's the nature of the story. So I just feel like that person either wanted a more serious kind of telling of the story or just wanted a straight up screwball comedy. And they didn't like the fact that it was blending the genres.
Well, I think that's the trick. I go back to Ebert, and when you're thinking about a movie, how well does it succeed on what it is trying to achieve? And if you go in to this movie expecting it to be a let's just say harder core Hitchcock, right? Something that's a little bit more angled on the thriller and the intrigue and the darkness.
Yeah, like Vertigo or something.
Yeah, right. Then this
not
isn't
a funny one.
This isn't your movie. This movie is it sets up very early what it wants to be, and if you don't buy it, I understand how you're not going to like this movie. I understand how it's not going to connect with you. But does it succeed if you're willing to give it that sense of disbelief? Then these people, Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, are playing the characters that certainly we imagine ourselves being if we were caught in the same situation. Suave, debonair, charming, always one with a great line, always one to see around corners, right? This is absolutely who I would love to be in this movie. That sense of that sort of childlike sort of dream state that I can go in when I watch a great movie like this. It's on display here.
Very much so. Very much.
Grant, we've already talked about the age difference, but we've got to talk about Grant, the character, or the actor, because he's got gray hair in this movie.
Right.
In my head, I'd forgotten it. Cary Grant was the actor that never aged to me. And I think we're so accustomed now to seeing older actors who will go to great lengths to maintain their youthful appearance, that to see Cary Grant actually look like an aging man was shocking.
Yeah, and I mean, only 4 years after North by Northwest, which
right.
I feel like there was a big age jump for him, like from that movie to this movie. And it's funny because I never noticed that as a kid. This was actually, when I watched this, it was the first movie experience I ever had watching Cary Grant. And so I never I don't know. I guess I never really saw him as, I saw them both as older people because honestly, I was pretty young, and anyone who's a grown up is just a grown up. I didn't really see him as more of a grandfather or father to her. And I didn't really think about that sort of thing. I just thought that they were two older people and that's the way it was. And I didn't have any issues. But it is an interesting thing that, he's not dyeing his hair here. He's really just kind of going with the gray. And again, I think smartly, they allow the script to kind of bring that up. The fact that, they have these moments about kind of where the two of them, part of their repartee is about each other's age, that she's so young and that he's so old. And I think that it plays well. And I think Grant, I assume that he had to be at a point in his career where he's just like, I am going to let the gray out and I'm going to be okay with it because, we're making a point of it. I think it helps the film.
How about the goons, Andy? How about the goons? Was this, this is a murderer's row of menacing faces. It's amazing.
It's great. Yeah, we've got Walter Matthau comes in, who's kind of the surprise goon. He, as it turns out, is Carson Dial, although we think he's Hamilton Bartholomew through the bulk of the film. And then, of course, the trio of James Coburn, George Kennedy, and Ned Glass as Tex, Herman, and Gideon, the three the real goons. I loved these guys when I was a kid. I still do. George Kennedy with that claw hand scared the pants off me when Tex corners Reggie in the phone booth and is just dropping matches, like lit match after lit match on her lap. That scared the crap out of me. And Gideon is just, he's kind of the goofier character, but there's something about him that is just off, but still, he sneezes all the time, and it's, he almost is written as the more comedic of the bunch.
Well, he is, but I couldn't figure out the sneezing part. Was it just a general allergy, or was there something that I should have connected to what was going on in the scene?
Oh, I just think it was just general sneezes,
a character thing.
Sneezing fits, yeah.
All right.
Yep. Great actors, all of them, though. Ned Glass, we actually just saw in North by Northwest. He was the guy selling... he's at the ticket booth. He's selling the ticket in the train station to Cary Grant's character, and he recognizes him in the paper, and he goes off to make a call, and then comes back, and Grant is gone. That's Ned Glass. So the two of them had just been together a few years before, and then of course, James Coburn, who. He's at a point here where he's just about to start doing his own kind of little spy spoofs with the Flint films. And George Kennedy, he is a great, kind actor. He does so many great roles, but he can also be really tough. And this is my first experience watching him. He's always scared me a little bit.
Yeah, the hand. Does a great job with the hand, and that the fight scene that they have on the roof was fascinatingly thrilling, given sort of who they are. I think they did a fantastic job making that just scary.
I always wonder how he got off the edge.
Yeah, he just leaves him hanging there from his hand, his claw. 188 credits that he ended up with. I missed George Kennedy. Died in 2016.
Sadly, one of his later films in his life was Creepshow 2.
Warm place in your heart.
Oh, boy, I tell you. That was one of those ones I was like, oh, really? Gotta be in that one.
I have to bring up, that's the one that had the mold on the lake.
Oh, that is the best story in that one. Yeah. But Old Chief Woodenhead is the story he's in, where the little, statue that comes to life. But he's in the Naked Gun movies. He definitely was all over the place
in the Naked Gun movie
with the genres that he did.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I always did enjoy about him.
The Final Insult. That would have been great if that had been his last movie. I notice you have not yet made a James Coburn connection to Hudson Hawk, so I will do it here. Hudson Hawk, Bunny, bye-bye. And Ned, they were great thrillers. And then Walter Matthau, can we talk about his face? There's something on it.
That mustache, man.
Rough.
I mean, good for the character, but rough for Matthau.
He just ends up looking extra sleazy when he has a mustache on his
It's not
face.
even a full mustache. Like, it's just like, oh, hey, I woke up yesterday morning and I knew I was going to be doing this, so I thought I would start growing a mustache.
Right. It's not too thick. Not too thick. He's, it's funny. I've watched a lot of Walter Matthau films lately. And so I just, it's been a great reminder of how much I love seeing him on screen. He's just so much fun. And although I will say Hello, Dolly was one of the ones that I recently watched. And I will say it's not fun watching him sing. That was a little rough for me. But here, watching him be this character who seems to be helping her, but turns out to be the bad guy, is just great. I think that and I don't know, is this the only time I've seen him where he's kind of ends up being the antagonist? It may be. I think that he ends up working really well in this role.
I do too. He's not very threatening. Right? Even in the big standoff at the end, I'm not threatened by him, but I think that's okay. That he's still, after the turn, a bit nebbishy.
Well, that's what I think that works really well. And it's an interesting thing to bring up because I like the fact that, once you have a gun in your hand, it doesn't matter how nebbishy you are.
Yeah,
you're
right.
as likely to kill someone as anyone else, if you're threatened. And so I think that that's interesting for him. And I love everything about the climax of this film here, from the moment where she is being chased by Grant through the columns and you have the fantastic editing kind of cutting between the two of them, to meeting up with Matthau's character and the reveal of who everyone is, and then the run into the theater and the hiding and the way that they play with the trapdoors to kind of save her. It works really well. I always wish that there was a way that she could have been a little more a part of the actual solution to the climax of the film and getting rid of the antagonist. It's one of those, man comes in and saves the day sort of endings. But I write that off a little bit as of its time. I think largely it's an incredibly strong way to finish the film.
Well, and she's very spry in those heels. She outruns everybody.
Boy, I tell you, she could just, she should have just kept running. She didn't need to go into the theater.
She could go totally Forrest Gump on the whole thing. Although I will say that final climax, the whole setup of the final climax, she runs into the theater and she's in the conductor's box. And so she's got the little footlights at the base of the stage. And we have Coburn, who's walking around on the top of the stage. He doesn't see her until, ironically, Cary Grant gives away that she's in that conductor's box. He hears her and he starts walking toward her. And the whole setup of Cary Grant under the stage and her in the box, and now the door is jammed.
Locked in the box, right? Yeah, right.
She can't get out. And Coburn walking very slowly over to...
Not Coburn, Matthau.
Matthau, I'm sorry. I misspoke earlier too. Matthau walking very slowly over toward her in the box, while we see that the entire stage it's got all the trapdoors for the orchestra, right, as pieces. I'm assuming that's where all the little chairs go up and down when they put them on stage. But I was assuming it was for a show where actors would drop through for particular roles. Trapdoors.
I know. It's really a lot.
Many trapdoors. There are so many trapdoors.
I know so little. Clearly, I know so little about putting on a stage show when it has that many trapdoors.
What show is that? That has trapdoors it's just a grid of trapdoors 3 feet.
Like, is that how small they are? Like Javert when he jumps off the bridge in Les Mis? Is he aiming for a little square that small?
Because that's horrible. Sheesh. That is malpractice. It is not kind to your employees or your actors.
It's like circus diving when you're diving into the comically small pool of water, right?
The first Cirque du Soleil show was done right here. It is crazy. And so we have this, he's playing like Nemesis battleship, Cary Grant, right? He's underneath and he has all these levers and he's listening for where the footsteps are, and so that he pulls exactly the right coordinate release to open that trapdoor. And it is for something that I'm looking at it, I'm thinking this setup is so stupid with all the trapdoors. How stupid. It's really thrilling. I am so in it. I just can't think that hard about it because I am, it just feels like the ultimate bamboozle. And yet it is great. It's great.
It is great. And I'm always thinking, if I think about it too much, I'm like, okay, why doesn't he just grab all the handles and just pull them all real quick? And just so the whole stage is just like this
Swiss
grid
cheese.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or just like at random. So he feels, so then you get to play a game, right?
Yeah, right.
You never know which one's going to drop. Oh, could have
Exactly.
been. What the movie that could have been. Anyway, it is a great climax to the movie. And the way he falls and the way they let him land on his feet and sort of bounce to unconsciousness. I don't know what happens to him. Like, he didn't sustain a head injury.
Well, and I would assume that, a fall like that, you're landing on your feet, it's going to probably snap your legs when you land.
Something broke.
Yeah. And I would assume that they get him and he's in the hospital.
Yeah.
In my head, ever since I watched this, I've always assumed he's dead until just now when you bring that up. How weird is that I just always assume that he falls and dies?
That he fell to his death?
But
it
makes no sense, though. You're right.
No.
'Cause why would he fall if he just lands on his feet?
Yeah, I mean, he falls, he
legs.
lands on his feet and just sort of bounces up and then he's laying on the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, well. I clearly also know nothing about gravity, so we'll let that go. Okay, so the way we meet these three guys is, so this is the end of the movie where we've whittled them down, but the way we meet the nemesis in the beginning is also a great setup, the funeral.
It is. It's a really clever way to introduce us to these three characters who are going to be so antagonistic through the bulk of the film, where you have them each come in to Reggie's, dead husband's funeral, and they each kind of come in to offer their kind of sympathies, but also to check on the fact that, is he really dead? And the way that they're like, we first have
It was
Gideon.
Ned Glass, right?
Yeah, Gideon come in and kind of check him to see if he's dead and sneeze. And then you've got Tex come in and kind of do the whole mirror thing to make sure he's not breathing. And then
so great, the mirror under the nostrils is
right,
just great.
So you're already like on edge because these guys are kind of so off. And then, of course, Scobie comes in and he just slams the door open, clearly an angry person, jabs him with a pin, storms out.
He is unhinged.
Oh, wow. It's a great way to introduce these antagonistic characters with very little dialogue. You get it all through action and you get a sense of who these characters are. And then what the story does is we've set up these characters as the antagonists, because right after this, we go to kind of we have the jovial scene where we have Reggie and at this point, Peter going to they see the Punch and Judy show, and then they go to this club where they do this crazy orange game. Really fun time for these two characters to get to hang out and get to know each other. But then you get these characters, these three antagonists, start threatening her. And that's when it really kicks in. You've got these antagonists, and then the twists come, because then all of a sudden Peter's working with them and he's a different person. And then all of them are working together. It's like the way the story shifts. I just think it's such clever writing because you never know where it's going to go. That's what's great with having these antagonistic characters where they're the bad guys, but then all of a sudden everybody's working together. It's like you just don't see that very often. It's really clever writing.
It's really clever writing, the way they sort of unravel Grant's worldview, right? That he goes back and forth from being, the assistant, the helpful sort of mentor, the grandfather character, weird, to being, like you say, he's working with them. Then ultimately, the way he ends up the head of this department at the Treasury Department, working in the embassy, and that he was the one trying to save the stamps all along.
Just to retrieve the government's money, really.
Right, to get the government's money back, which was, I think, and we should probably set up, if you haven't seen it in a while, the stamp bit, the stamp and the gold bit is something that I feel like we've either seen before or we're about to see again. The way the whole caper was built up. These 5 soldiers, right, all the bad guys, plus Dial and Lambert, were all soldiers together and in the war, and they were supposed to bring, they were members of the OSS, and they were supposed to bring $250,000 in gold
to the French resistance.
Deliver it to the French resistance, but they didn't do that. Instead, they buried it. And their whole plan was to come back together after the war and retrieve the gold. But somebody else, Lambert, took the gold alone and converted it into stamps, these 3 precious stamps.
Well, first it sounded like he converted it to all the stuff in their house, right? Because then she said he went and sold all of it for $250,000 at auction, and then he took that and converted it to the stamps.
Into the stamps, right. These 3 collector's stamps worth many, many tens of thousands of dollars each.
Yes.
And so that's how we got to the stamps. The whole idea of these members of the military, of the government, deciding to double-cross their orders, bury money somewhere in order to retrieve it later, I feel like is a story we're about to see again.
I feel like it is.
Coming soon.
It will already be here. It will already have been released.
It will
Netflix.
already have been released. That is, and it's coming. I think it's coming on the film board.
I think
if we play our cards right, we'll be talking about it soon. Which is funny to me because I don't like the trailer communicates we're talking about the 5 Bloods, and the trailer to me communicates everything about this movie. I'm watching this movie thinking, I think this movie is about to come out again, and nowhere can I find that there's any relationship to these movies. So we shall see.
Well, it's it's really like the story of the robbery itself. And it's kind of like Three Kings also, right?
Yep.
It's that same type of robbery during wartime, although it depends on what they're stealing. In this particular case, I would argue that these 5 soldiers are committing a war crime by stealing the government's money that's supposed to go to resistance fighters.
Yes.
It's like that's pretty bad. Three Kings, they're stealing gold from Saddam.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's still, theft, but you're stealing it from the enemy. I'm not sure where it is with the 5 Bloods as far as who's stealing what. I can't recall from the trailer.
But look at how much moral gray area we've uncovered on the show. Andy's okay with some war crimes.
Well, the war crimes here, all 5 of the thieves are dead by the end of the film.
So just desserts, everybody.
That's right.
What are you doing in here?
I'm having a nervous breakdown.
I want to talk a little bit about their relationship between Reggie and Peter, Alex, Adam, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
I think that another reason that it ends up working so well in this film is because this film, it came out in the early 60s, but it's a time when you're already getting a little more kind of that sexually exploitative types of films and relationships depicted in the 60s. It's already kind of starting to make that tonal shift in what films are being released and stuff. And that's something I think is really clever. And especially, just look at the James Bond films.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I want to say by this point, is it 2 James Bond films will have come out by 1963?
From Russia with Love. It came out in May.
From Russia with Love.
May of the same year. Not in the U.S. either. It didn't come out until 1964 in the U.S. From Russia with Love. So really the only thing that we had was Dr. No.
Gotcha. There's definitely a lot less to the relationships than there are in this film. This film, there's this very much a romantic relationship, and by the end, it's leading to marriage, right? It's not just bedding the woman because she's next to you and she's hot. And I think that that's something that is a little bit more of a throwback to kind of old films from the 40s, 50s, even the 30s that we're getting a sense of here with these 2 characters. And I think that that's really great because even if they have lines that feel a little bit more like kind of poking at the Hays Code and just lines that kind of play with that line a little bit, I don't think that it really ever goes down the road that it could have gone with other spy films of the era. And so I think that that's something else that really makes this one stand out. And we have a female who's really kind of leading the charge. We don't need a James Bond or a Flint or any of these other kind of spy characters that happen to be male to be leading the charge. We have Reggie, who's the one who's kind of figuring all this out. I think it's a thrill.
There is something that's just so joyously Randy about her. Like the way she plays her pursuit of Cary Grant is fantastic. If I may highlight the shower scene, and it is a shower scene that is so it's so ridiculously cute. And it pays off. It's like a setup of a joke that works in its own right. But when you find out who he is at the end, it is made even better. Like the reason he chooses that she tricks him. She screams in her room so that he will burst in to try to protect her. And then when he's in the room, she's standing behind the door. She closes it and locks him in and invites him to take a shower in her bathroom. And he does. He leaves the door open and he gets in the shower and he leaves the curtain open and he's in the shower and he's wearing his suit and he just says drip dry and starts reading the label. And it is adorable and a great laugh and a great moment between these two that I think does a wonderful job of setting up their relationship and how, it's that sort of curses foiled again pursuit moment that, she's trying, she's working him and he's just can see around corners.
It's just super charming.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about it is these characters are just so incredibly charming. And it does make you really pine for this type of storytelling where all of it was a little more kind of coded and stuff. And I just feel like it just ends up allowing for a really clever way to kind of portray relationships like this. Even if it does by the end and it's leading to marriage, you're like, okay, how long have they been together? Like all of a few days and they're already getting married. But hey, you know what?
Well, I think she was ready, the moment she found out her husband had been killed and sold off all of their worldly possessions and she was left with a couple of suitcases. I sort of get the feeling like they could have moved on to marriage back in that scene in the house.
Probably.
She was crushing on him early.
She was crushing on him while she was still married, as far as she knew, at the resort. Because she's just like, I'm getting a divorce. Like she instantly was like already in a place ready to leave her husband.
So good. Ugh.
Still, one of my favorite lines that comes so early in the film is in that scene when she's like, I already know an awful lot of people. Until one of them dies, I couldn't possibly meet anyone else.
I do.
Seriously.
I love that line.
So good.
It's another one of those lines. It's in that category of lines that I adopted into my own vernacular and then after many years forgot where it came from. And so it just felt like me.
Like, how did I get to be so clever?
How did I get to be so witty? Oh, right. Right. I remember now.
Yes, that would be our
It was
writers.
Peter Stone, the other witty Peter.
Yes, right. Peter Stone, he and Mark Baim had written this spec script. This was back in, I don't know if it was the early 60s or late 50s, but they'd written a spec script. It was called The Unsuspecting Wife. They took it around in Hollywood. Nobody was interested in it. They talked to all the studios and nobody bought into it. And so Stone, he said, you know what, I'm going to just take our script. I'm going to write it into a novel, retitle it Charade. And then he also got it serialized in Red Book magazine, which was something everybody was doing with their books at the time. And it was that Red Book serial that actually caught the eye of the studios who had rejected him before. So it's funny how it had to go through this writing cycle to get to a place where the studio's like, ooh, look at this. And that's,
trusted
of course,
property.
Right, exactly. That's when Stanley Donen came in. He had just finished a 3-picture deal with 20th Century Fox a little bit before, and that's where he had met Cary Grant when they did Kiss Them For Me in 1957. He, at that point, became an independent producer-director, and he and Grant just totally hit it off. They formed their own production company called Grandin Productions, and they signed a distribution deal with Warner Brothers. And from that point on, he was a self-producing person for almost the rest of his career, generally under Stanley Donen Productions, unless he was doing something with Grant through Warner Brothers, and then there was Grandin Productions. This was not a Grandin production film. This was Stanley Donen. He did it with Universal. And he saw that story, and he's the one who bought the rights. And then he had Peter Stone rework the script and tailoring it specifically to Grant and Hepburn, which we've kind of talked about already. Stanley Donen, he did have a couple things to say about Cary Grant. He said, Cary Grant's real magic came from his attention to minute details and always seeming real, which came from enormous amounts of work rather than just being something that was God-given. He also said that Grant was the greatest and most important actor in the history of the cinema, which is a pretty big and broad statement. I guess when he's your producing partner, maybe that's the sort of thing you throw around a little more casually.
Well, I do want to bring up the point because you made a comment, it was last week or the week before, about Cary Grant as a movie star, right? He's a movie star. When we see him, it's hard to lose yourself in the character that he's playing because he's so Cary Grant.
Yes.
Is that a fair characterization?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's true. And I think that makes him an incredibly important actor in the history of the cinema because he helped define what a movie star was, how a movie star drew an audience to the theater, things like that. I don't know if he's like, a Marlon Brando type or a Dustin Hoffman type who really buries himself in his roles, but still he is like, there's something about him that helps define kind of just movie star.
Well, and I would go back to my relationship with him in my head, which is he is the man that I would imagine myself to be in that scenario. It's not like I'm not imagining myself as the 400-pound Brando at the head of the river. You know what I mean? Like that's a character piece, and I get that for the story. But for Cary Grant, he is one of the classic Hollywood avatars. And that's why we went to see him in movies, right? Because he's a guy who draws us into the experience of the film, who allows us to say, I would say Hepburn is the same thing, right? When you talk to women like my mom's age, they went to see movies for Hepburn and Grant because they were the relationships that they always wanted to be when they grew up. That was what they aspired to, that sort of, that the way they spoke, the way they moved, the way they dressed. And it was like when the movies changed and had new demands for these sorts of superstar actors. You compare Cary Grant to how Brad Pitt's career could have gone, right? I mean, he ended up taking some very risky roles, but Brad Pitt could have been the poster child of this kind of actor had he been born 30, 40 years prior.
This is the fourth and final film that Grant does with Stanley Donen. He did Kiss Them For Me in 1957, Indiscreet in 1958, and then The Grass is Greener in 1960, and this one. The only other actor I wanted to bring up was Jacques Marine, who plays the inspector, the police inspector here. I think he's great here. He's not an actor I'm that familiar with, but I did want to bring him up because I found this to be really interesting. His last film was as the uncredited French reporter on the TV news in Monsters, Inc. in 2001.
I'll be darned.
He's the sort of face that would work well in our French crime series. He seems like the sort that would pop up there.
Oh, he's every French police stereotype. Every one of them, all the way to the mustache.
Yeah. And, he's as Parisian as the locations here. I mean, what they filmed in Paris, it really helps. I mean, obviously there's sets and there are, we have the backdrops like when they're on the river and stuff. But I mean, it feels so on location. And that's something I love about the movie.
I feel like if we're going to talk about Jacques Marine, we should at least name drop Paul Boniface as the stamp dealer, who was in a lot of things.
He was.
Had a healthy career, especially, much earlier than this movie. And I'm not a real student of him, but he does have he has one of those faces that you realize, oh my gosh, I've seen that face before. And he has a deeply sensitive moment in this movie. He sort of stops time as he shares his adoration for the work that go into these tiny, tiny stamps. And we get these beautiful kind of macro sort of shots of the stamps with his little tweezer tips in them as he's talking about how I'm not a thief. And I for a brief time, these were mine and that's all I need. And it's just a beautiful, heart-wrenching sort of moment.
He and Jacques Marine would be in The Train, John Frankenheimer's film, the very next year.
The next year, yeah.
Yeah. You brought up just the fact that you were talking about him. I want to talk about the stamps real quick before I know we also want to talk about the music, but I do want to talk about these stamps because I think that's an interesting thing that I never really dug into until this, and I now find it really interesting. So we see 3 stamps that the story kind of is focused on because they are what everybody is pursuing once they realize that's what they're pursuing. So we see the Swedish 4-shilling stamp from 1854, the Den Gula Fyraskillingen, which translates to the Yellow Lighthouse, which he says is worth 85,000. This is actually, it's interesting. All 3 stamps are not real, but they're based on real stamps, and all of them have been shifted. Their denomination has been shifted by 1. And so it's the 4-shilling Swedish stamp. It's based on the 3-shilling Swedish Treskilling Yellow. It is the only one of its kind. Last sold in 2010 for at least 2.3 million. That's what it had been valued at. They know it sold for at least that much, but it could have been more. Actual price was kept confidential. Today, it's estimated to be worth over $3 million. The 3-cent Hawaiian blue, they said a man was murdered another man for it in 1894, which is true, except it was actually based on the 2-cent Hawaiian missionary stamp, only a handful of which are still around. The estimated value of these are between $285,000 for a used one and $575,000 for an unused one today. And the 82 Gazette Maldav, which is a hand-painted stamp from Romania, it is based on the 81 Para, which is the currency Moldavian Cap de Boer, or Bull's Head stamp. The first set of these Romanian stamps were sold in 1858. There are only 2 copies that survive in mint, never hinged original gum condition. They're estimated at between $80,000 and $115,000 per stamp. So it's interesting that that's the film that this stamp collector says is worth the most, $100,000 in the film, but it's actually worth the least in reality. The one that's worth the most is the first one. That's over $3 million for that one little stamp.
Wow.
Yeah. But one of the reasons I guess they changed the denominations and all this is because rare stamps are worth so much more, and they did have to come up with stamps that just happened to equal just exactly $250,000.
Yeah, right.
So
it's funny looking at all of these stamps. Are you a stamp guy?
I did collect stamps as a kid, but it was never really for things that were worth things. I just really loved the looks of them, and I just loved all the different art from different countries. So I still have like all the stamps I collected as a kid. I've never done anything with them, but I just find them to be really interesting little tiny pieces of art.
You should see if in your collection you have one of the British Guiana 1-cent magentas. You should see if you have one of those. Yeah, because apparently in auction in 2014, it fetched $9.5 million. Wow. You think you have one of those?
I bet I don't.
Looking through,
but you know what? It's Schrodinger's cat. Of course I do. Until I look.
Do. Yeah, don't look. Don't look. No one will look. It's funny to look at how many of them the value is determined by the inversion, like the error in printing, like the inverted Jenny, right? The classic. I guess that's the classic upside down biplane that was screwed up. There's a CIA invert where this candle is printed upside down that's worth millions. It makes me think that people are vastly undervaluing the mistakes I've made in my life.
They're worth a lot more, let me tell you.
So much when I screw up stuff.
That's a great way to start looking at it.
Yeah, right. How about Henry Mancini? Do you think he ever made any mistakes?
He doesn't in this film, I'll tell you that much.
Certainly not.
Oh my God, this music, it's so good right out of the gate. And with the brilliant Morris Binder titles that we have, where it's just like the swirling arrows and just the lines on screen. And then that that little beat kicks in, and it's just like this incessant driving beat that feels as swirly and as mysterious as everything else. And of course, the song that he wrote with Johnny Mercer, which that just defines this movie as much as anything else. I mean, I just love that song. It's got such a great vibe to it that has this mystery, this romance. It can be played for tragedy. It just, like, everything about the music works flawlessly in the film.
It is fantastic. And unlike, this is one of those Mancini things. Like, unlike some of these 40s, 50s, 60s films that we talk about, the soundtrack might be kind of hard to find. Not this one. It's everywhere, and it's great. Stream it, find it, listen to it. It's all over the place. And the whole thing you can listen to all the way through, all the way to the theme that he wrote for Punch and Judy, which I'm not sure. We just had a conversation with somebody in the community about Punch and Judy and how we might not know what Punch and Judy was because it was such a sort of European thing. European,
and because
Australian.
I think it was because somebody just watched the Judy and Punch movie, and so they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure people in America know much about this whole thing." But I think it was just one of those things where I feel like maybe it's only because of this, but I feel like Punch and Judy, I don't know, I feel like it's been in the zeitgeist, right?
Yes.
Like, I feel like I've always known about Punch and Judy. I don't know if I've ever really seen an official Punch and Judy show, but I definitely know about the two puppets and kind of that whole thing. So
they're not good to each other, Punch and Judy.
No, they're not too great.
The things we do for comedy. All right.
There are some interesting facts and tidbits with this film. This film was released Christmas 1963, and Audrey Hepburn has a line in it, "At any moment we could be assassinated." Well, of course, this came out shortly after President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and so they actually had to dub over the line to "At any moment we could be eliminated." It was pretty obvious. Her lip reading, her lips definitely didn't match up. And it was something that was fixed when the film was restored, got back to the original dialogue. This film, however, it fell into the public domain. I'll talk about that here in a minute. But if you do find public domain versions, they may actually still have the original dubbed line. As far as the public domain, this film has the copyright notice at the beginning. It has the year by Universal Pictures and Stanley Donen Films, all rights reserved, but it omitted saying copyright or the little C symbol. And at the time, this was anything before 1978, you had to have the word, the abbreviation, or the symbol in order for copyright to actually be carried. And so the instant the instant Universal released the film, it entered public domain because it did not have that verbiage in that. Obviously, it's since changed, but it's very interesting that this is one of those films that just kind of everybody has been able to release because of that public domain issue. And I guess the film's available, but the music itself, I guess, is still technically copywritten if used outside the context of the film. So yeah, I didn't realize that. But obviously,
fascinating. Did you find any other films that because of this, we'll call it a typographical omission, lost their license?
I don't know. The only other one that I know for sure is in the public domain is Detour, which we've also talked about on the show. I just don't know if it was for the same reason or not.
You really wonder who that title guy was.
Right. And if Universal was, had a few strong words with him.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. The last little fact and tidbit, there was a moment early on in the film where Reggie goes to the U.S. Embassy to meet Bartholomew. And it really struck me this time because two men get on the elevator and she gets off. And the camera stays in the elevator and we join these two guys as they're having this conversation about bluffing somebody. He says, "I bluffed the old man out of the last pot with a pair of deuces." And I'm like, why are we staying with these guys? I don't get this. Yeah. And now she's out there. I'm like, okay, so there's something odd about that. Well, it turns out that the guy speaking is actually Peter Stone, the screenwriter. And what's interesting is the voice that he's speaking with is actually Stanley Donen's voice. It was a way to do a joint cameo for the screenwriter and the director to get them both in there, which is really funny. And then Stone, his voice actually got to be used later as the U.S. Marine who's guarding the embassy at the end of the film when they go inside. And she's like, "Excuse me,
Marine.
soldier." Yeah, she's like, "Excuse me, soldier. Marine, ma'am." That's Stone's voice. So,
but not him. It was a
but not him.
Okay. I have to say, particularly because you bring up the elevator, which I thought was an interesting choice, an interesting way to use the camera. The even more interesting that I wrote down was the corpse cam.
Oh, yeah, right.
Fascinating choice to do. She's there to identify her husband's body, and we see the toe tag, and we see that, and then we shift to this POV from inside the refrigerator drawer, and we're looking up at the mortician or the I don't know what he was.
The person working in the morgue.
Yeah, and he's pushing the refrigerator drawer in, and we're in there from the perspective of the body moving into the drawer, and it's once again, it's one of those deceptively thrilling camera angles that sort of reminds you this is a movie that contains multitudes.
And it's a really interesting one because it's clearly not the dead husband's point of view, because he's been, one, covered up under the sheet, two, going toe first into the drawer, not head first, and the camera is looking out at him, so it would be reversed.
Yeah.
And so it's just an odd position, but it is something that just kind of throws you and gives you a different perspective that kind of keeps you on edge. It's really clever filmmaking, which I think Donen exhibits throughout the film.
Man behind the camera, Charles Lang was our man behind the camera, and I don't believe we've talked about anything else he did. He had 152 credits in the studio period, and he's great.
Yeah, and also one of those guys who was recognized, maybe not winning, but recognized by the Oscars for quite a bit of his films. Mm-hmm. He was nominated quite a number of times. I think he only won one. Yeah, Ace in the Hole. Okay, there you go.
We got one.
Yep.
We got one.
It feels very like shadowy when it needs to be, romantic when it needs to be. I think he captures the essence of the film.
Absolutely. Apart from the homage that I insinuated earlier may be coming to this film, do we have any other official sequels or remakes?
We do have one. Yes, indeed. It is Jonathan Demme decided to do a remake of this. It's kind of a remake to it while also being an homage to Truffaut's Shoot the Piano Player. Mm-hmm. It is The Truth About Charlie from 2002 with Mark Wahlberg and Tandy Newton. I thought it was interesting. It was an interesting twist on it. I don't know if I completely loved it. I saw it in theaters. I haven't seen it since, but it is something that I'm really curious about to kind of revisit now after having just watched this again to see if there's anything about it that really makes it stand out as being worth our time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think I saw it.
It's worth checking out. It definitely was a period where Jonathan Demme, the one memory I have of it is his camera work throughout parts of it were like, oh, this is getting a little too crazy now. What are you doing, man? It just kind of, the camera's all over the place, and I'm not sure why. Because, I mean, that was something Demme really was kind of doing quite a bit at the end of his career, so.
Hell, his hair got wild. His eyes popped a bit. He just got crazy, Demme.
Are you calling him pop-eyed?
I've discovered now, after our Peter Lorre discussion, that's okay, right? Isn't that okay?
That's the thing. Oh, sure, Pete. Yes, you go ahead. You go ahead. No, did I tell you I worked with Jonathan Demme on a film?
No, Andy, please tell me how you worked with Jonathan Demme on a film.
I got to work with him on Jimmy Carter, Man from Plains. His documentary following Jimmy Carter on his book tour.
Okay. How was that? Did he do weird camera angles? How were his eyes?
He was one of the cameramen. He was running around with his little, I don't know, it was a handy cam of some sort filming at this thing. It was surreal being in the room with Jonathan Demme and Jimmy Carter while all of this was going on.
Did
totally
they talk
unrelated
about,
to this movie,
did they talk any about Hamilton? About Habitat for Humanity? That comes up a lot around Carter now.
Right.
Anyway, how to do an award season.
It wasn't a big award movie. I think it was just a little too genre for people to put into the award circles, but it did have 3 wins with 9 other nominations. At the Oscars, the song that Mancini and Mercer wrote for this, the title song, Charade, lost to Call Me Irresponsible from Papa's Delicate Condition, which I had never even heard of. Of course, I had heard the song. It's one of those kind of classics that you hear. I mean, even I think Michael Bublé has covered that song these days. It was actually an interesting run of songs, and I'm curious how many of them you have heard of. There's that one that I just did, So Little Time from 55 Days at Peking, which I hadn't heard. There was It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, the title song from that movie.
Yes.
And the song More from the film Mondo Cane.
Nope. Well, maybe. I don't know.
I guarantee.
How's it go?
You've heard that song.
That's it's feels like a song that it's one of those that if it played, I know I've heard it.
Okay, so more da 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 da.
Oh yeah, da da da.
Yeah. Right. So what's interesting about More, this is also unrelated to Charade, but I find it really interesting. That song came out with this film Mondo Cane, that was a film that was this kind of spoof documentary, that it was basically a travelogue film going around the world, filming cultural practices with the intention to shock or surprise audiences. It spurred on a whole kind of genre that became called Mondo films, that were basically exploitation documentaries where people would go around and film just over the top, like crazy things from around the world. And now I feel like that's, what we see all the time on videos on YouTube and TikTok and everything else. That's kind of the whole thing. But anyway, that's where weirdly it all came from, this song, in a song that doesn't even feel like it fits the tone of what this movie is. Anyway, just had to throw that out there. So that was that award. Back to awards. Golden Globes. Audrey Hepburn was nominated for Best Actress at the Golden Globes, and Cary Grant was nominated for Best Actor at the Golden Globes. They both lost. And then at the BAFTAs, Hepburn won for Best British Actress, and Cary Grant lost for Best Foreign Actor to Marcello Mastroianni in Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. Peter Stone won the Best Motion Picture Screenwriting Award for the Edgar Allan Poe Awards. And at the David DiDonatello Awards, it won the Golden Plate, which is, I think, kind of an honorary prize for Universal Pictures for the artistic contribution. I'm not really sure what that all means, but there you go.
And how about at the box office? Did this little genre-y film end up making any money?
Well, Stanley Donen's film cost a cool $3 million to make, which is about $25.1 million in today's dollars. The movie was released December 5th, 1963, and while it didn't land in the top 10, it still did well for itself, earning nearly $13.5 million at the box office, or $112.8 million in today's dollars. That is a solid take, giving it an adjusted profit per finished minute of $776,000, making it the most successful financial film of Grant's in this particular series, and this film was Stanley Donen's most financially successful film he made through his whole career.
So what do you think about this as we wrap up our very brief Cary Grant series? How does Cary Grant fit for you? Have you learned anything about Grant and his work that you feel like has changed the way you look at him?
He's an actor who is just very easy to watch. Like, I've never had an issue watching Cary Grant. He just makes a film that much joyful to enjoy because he brings so much personality and just that suave, debonair kind of Hollywood movie star feel to it. I think that he is really strong in his career. This film in particular, I didn't tell this story, but this was at the time. I had a stepmom whose mom, so I guess my step grandma, I would call her. She was in some video club, one of those things where you get a VHS tape every month, And this movie she gave it to me, and I was just like, why are you giving me this? This was a point in my life where I'm like, watching just nothing but kid movies. And so technically this was probably the first grown-up movie that I ever actually owned. And I didn't watch it for a while. And then when I finally watched it, I'm like, oh my God, it's just magical. And I think a lot of it is just kind of the Cary Grant, Audrey Hepburn, and just kind of that spy thriller comedy that we have. It's a very easy film to watch. And Grant is he fits that, right? He's just very easy to watch.
He really does. It's so funny. For me, watching this movie after watching, particularly starting with Arsenic and Old Lace, where he really showcases that sort of buffoonery. And I had not made a connection of his deep vaudeville roots before watching that movie. And you can totally see him just kind of unleashing that part of his body and his face in that movie. And I didn't connect with it that well because my Cary Grant is not that guy. My Cary Grant is the movie star Cary Grant. And so this is my Cary Grant. This guy represents everything that I feel like I know about him and I expect from him. And then when he does things like the weird faces, he does have a couple of mock faces in this movie that I think are so good and so part of his relationship there that are specifically and directly sort of tied to that background. And where it was over the top for me in Arsenic and Old Lace, it is on point for me in a movie like this one. And I just love it. I think one of the things that is interesting about Cary Grant is that he is, in my head at least, he's not noted as a guy who fell because of controversy, right? He left acting, he got into business, he had a healthy, by all rights, a healthy career after his performing days, right, in his older years, and he just. I think he's an interesting guy. There's this quote that stands out on his Wikipedia page where he says, "Death, of course I think of it, but I don't want to dwell on it. I think the thing you think about when you're my age is how you're going to do it and whether you'll behave well." And I feel like that's how Cary Grant should go out, right? He's a guy that just is always supposed to be around and always supposed to be charming and didn't end in a flurry of horrifying disrespect or crime or, moral injustice.
Yeah, right. I mean, he went out as I think a lot of Hollywood leads do at the time where, somebody who could never settle down, had far too many wives.
Yeah.
but still, it just, I think there's just something very
but I wonder, like, this
forgivable.
Maybe forgivable is the word. Maybe that's not a word we're supposed to use anymore.
Yeah,
I don't know. But I don't feel like, and this is probably my ignorance, but I haven't found anything that says he was just a horrible, horrible person or he was horrible to women. He married and divorced a lot, I guess. I mean, how many brides did he end up with?
He had five wives.
He married and divorced a lot with five wives over the course of his life, but I don't know. Does that make him, I don't know, bad guy?
No, I don't.
Maybe to his ex-wives.
Well, I never. I don't know if any of it was like bad endings. I haven't really looked into his the way his relationships ended, but I just think it was one of those things where he did have a period where he was getting into some drugs and stuff, but I don't know. I don't feel like he was ever the guy who was, having tangles with the police all the time because he was doing things.
Yeah. Well, he was fantastic to watch, and I really enjoyed this little series. Would love to come back and fill in some more holes down the road someday.
I'm really curious now I haven't seen any of the other films that he did with Donen. I'd be curious to see those ones.
Yeah, right. That'd be an easy set.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's probably time, Andy. I think it's time I think it's time for we to take it to the mat together.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've talked about on this very show. And there, if you swipe over in your show notes and you tap the word Flickchart, it'll take you straight to this movie in the catalog so you can add it to your list and see how it stands up against ours.
First up, we have Charade or La Cage aux Folles.
Charade.
Absolutely Charade. Charade or Do the Right Thing.
Oh, dear.
I love Do the Right Thing, but Charade
first.
is awfully high on my chart. I'll tell you right. I'm not going to tell you where it is yet, but Charade or Up in the Air?
Boy, talk about a movie that highlights some of the same relationship dynamics. And come on, Clooney.
Yeah.
He practically is Cary Grant.
Right? Maybe a little more political, but yes.
Yeah.
I say Charade.
Okay, me too.
Charade or Harold and Maude?
Charade.
Charade for me too. Charade or Casablanca?
Casablanca.
Charade for me.
All right, let's do it.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Scissors.
Paper. Oh, I was even late and I lost.
I know.
What was that all about? I had a vapor lock.
That's 100% on you.
Yeah.
Charade or E.T., the extraterrestrial? Charade for me.
Charade.
Charade or Raising Arizona?
Charade.
Charade for me. Charade or Network?
Network.
Charade for me.
Really? Okay. It's really high on your list, Andy. Like extraordinarily really high.
It is pretty high on my
Let's
list.
do it.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Rock.
Scissors.
Charade or The Godfather?
Oh, dear.
I feel guilty because, like, we have passed some that we've ranked that it's lower than on my personal chart, but we just haven't come up against them, and they're lower on this chart because of you. Because they lost
because
some of their
I
battles.
did not show up and play a good game.
That's right.
So I'm Godfather.
I'll say Charade.
Andy.
But I'm going to give it to you because I feel guilty about having Charade end up as our number one.
And you don't feel good about me being able to play the game. I see what's going on here.
I feel like, sometimes I just got to say, you know what? Pete's having a losing streak. I just got to give it to him right now.
This is me I'm gonna take
being
your
the
pity.
other horse rider in Seabiscuit, slowing down just so you can get ahead.
I'm Seabiscuit?
You are Seabiscuit here.
Well, I guess one of us has to be Seabiscuit. Okay. All right.
All right. Well, we're going to end it there. Charade is number 2 on our chart.
Holy crap. That is bananas.
It's not even that high on my chart. That's
it's
really
not
funny.
that high on my chart. Okay. All right. And because it's number 2, like, when's the last time? It's never going to be touched. It'll be years before it's touched. It is cemented now.
Well, I'll tell you, Pete, this is number 4 on my personal chart. So it's not far from number 2.
Number 4.
It's way up there for me. It's one of those ones where I think because it was a film I watched as a kid and it was a more grown-up film, like, I just have such an affinity for this film. It is just like everything about it is spot on perfect. So absolutely one of my all-time favorites. 4 out of 4382. So it is a full-on 100% on my personal flick chart.
It's 184 out of 1452 on my list. So it's pretty high. It's an 87%. Don't get me wrong. I liked it. I love how I feel like I've painted myself as the villain in this conversation.
I feel guilty that it's number 2. I feel like it shouldn't be that high, but it's just the way that things play out.
I feel like I just tripped Mother Teresa going upstairs.
We all know that story, Pete.
Flick chart. If I were to take my my flick chart experience here, trusting the algorithm over at letterboxd.com/thenextreel, this should be a 4.5 star. I'm going to give it the full 5. I mean, I like the movie that much with a heart. I did enjoy the movie, and I'll stick to that. I assume it's the same for you. Do I have to ask?
You don't have to. Full on 5 stars and a heart.
All right. Well, that does it, right, for this movie. And that does it for our very brief Cary Grant series. Where do we go from here?
Well, we are going to be taking a brief hiatus. We're kind of shortening our hiatus by, I think, just by a couple weeks. Is that about right?
Something like that. I don't even really know. What is it? What are we doing? We usually take the month of July off.
Yes, we do. But we are going to be skipping that, and we are going to be jumping into I shouldn't say skipping. We're cutting it in half, I think. And sometime mid-July-ish, I don't know the exact day, but we will be kicking off a new series. We're going to be looking at the Friday franchise. We're going to start with Friday from 1995, the next Friday from 2000, and Friday after next, 2002. This is one we've been holding off on because there continues to be talk about a fourth, Last Friday, but I think that they have since put the film on hold since one of the John Witherspoon, who had been in them, had passed away. So,
not just had been in them, dominated. He is very funny. I have not seen all of these, but Friday was one of my deep guilty pleasures. Gives me weirdly great joy, subversive joy watching that movie.
You introduced me to it in college, and it definitely is one that I've not been able to forget. I'm very excited about jumping into this, and I haven't seen the rest of them either, so I'm very much looking forward to watching the rest of them.
I can't believe you're as enthusiastic as you are because of Chris Tucker in this movie.
I don't have a problem with Chris Tucker. I just have a problem with Chris Tucker in the Fifth Element.
I don't know. We'll see how that pans out.
Like, what's the one he did with Jackie Chan? Like, those were great movies.
Yeah, those were great
very
movies.
Fun. Very fun.
What was it that he did with the Shanghai? No, that's
Shanghai Nights. No, that was
that was with
Owen Wilson.
Owen Wilson and Jackie Chan.
The one where they're the cops.
Man, nobody understands the words coming out of your mouth. Anyway, very good. Can't wait to talk about it.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins. Amazon giveth, Andrew.
As Amazon always doeth.
Amazon did again. Amazon also struggled to portray the fact that this movie is in the public domain and there are a lot of bad copies of it.
There are clearly a lot of people getting copies of copies of copies because everybody can make a copy of this one.
Yeah. And it makes me think that maybe you and I should start the next Real Publishing where we just sell on Amazon all kinds of public domain stuff and never look at the reviews again.
I think that's a great idea.
Just like Amazon.
Let's do it.
Let's do our reviews, Andy. Would you like to go first?
Okay. Sure. I've got a 1 star by Zurfer, who says, I'm honestly confused by the good reviews. This movie is terrible and not funny at all. I could go into detail why, but I don't see the point. It's trying to be Alfred Hitchcock and isn't. As far as I'm concerned, 2 non-admirable features of a film. I'm not really sure what to make of that. What is 2 non-admirable features?
I don't understand that.
Yeah.
Huh. But
anyway, there's Zurfer.
Maybe Dr. Rene Cadoni has something to say about it.
What's he have to say?
He says it's neither joke nor parody. An old American film directed by Stanley Donen starring Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, plus few minors, among which Walter Matthau, James Coburn, and George Kennedy. It spans 4 genres: suspense, thriller, romance, chick flick, and comedy, all and none in a way. As a particular flair of the U.S. cinema at the time, like Billy Wilder's Irma la Douce, same year, it has been filmed in Ooh La La Paris to a Henry Mancini score and theme song. Ooh La La Paris has the sex appeal of Playboy bunnies, equally forgettable ersatz. Acting has been better by all. They seem to miss U.S. film canteen culture after work, except for some rude style of speech and behavior, a well-known reactive uncertainty of operating in a foreign language environment. Europe seems of little inspiration, and the local U.S. Embassy, the only safe haven in such. Silly.
Oh, my.
You know what? I like Dr. Cadoni. He's very serious about it, and at least he's thought about it.
He certainly has put thoughts into this. Yes, he has.
Thank you, Dr. Cadoni. And thank you, Amazon.
It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We are highlighting adaptations from Season 9 over at our Originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. That's the site where listeners can purchase the source material for all of our adapted film discussions.
We had a big Robin Hood series this season, looking at 9 different versions on screen. Many were likely adapted from Howard Pyle's The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, including Douglas Fairbanks in Robin Hood, The Adventures of Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, and the 1991 Robin Hood, and Ridley Scott's Robin Hood.
Robin and Marian was specifically based on the ballad The Jest of Robin Hood.
And we really don't have too much to say about Robin and the Seven Hoods.
We talked Dead Ringers for our David Cronenberg series adapted from Barry Wood and Jack Geislin's novel Twins.
Have you checked out that show?
You know, I haven't, but I've heard great things.
2 comedies from our Steve Martin series were adaptations, Pennies from Heaven from the BBC series, and The Lonely Guy from the book by Bruce J. Friedman.
The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas was part of our Colin Higgins series, adapted from the Broadway musical.
Spike Lee brought us Black Klansman from Ron Stallworth's memoir.
And we looked at a trio of John le Carré adaptations, The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, The Little Drummer Girl, and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Plus, all 3 movies in our Agnieszka Holland series were based on books, Europa, Europa, In Darkness, and Spore.
La Cage aux Folles and its remake The Birdcage both came from Jean Poiret's original play.
We also talked about Arsenic and Old Lace and Charade in our Cary Grant series.
All of these were based on other material, and it is all available on our Originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. Every book purchased supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations we've covered and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.